try to squeeze my dad for his money. Tough luck. He knows money. Apologies for the format because I'm on mobile yada yada yada. Also, this is second-hand from my father and some words or phrasings may be mistranslated. The background. Back during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, Malaysia was hit pretty hard, especially the small independent banks. The Prime Minister at the time, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, passed a bill to save the banking economy by having all the larger corporate banks buy out the smaller independent banks. At the same time, he made the One Malaysia home loan policy. Under this, all larger banks that bought out the smaller independent banks must send an acknowledgement letter to the home loaners of their original banks stating the home loan change and must receive an acknowledgement from their new loaners, be it a signature, physical or digital. The story. My dad never liked how banks can legally rob people. For people like him who works the daily grind, having to pay the bank what is essentially 2 houses worth in interest payments over 2 or 3 decades is just plain wrong in his eyes. He strives to one day screw a bank over like how they screwed their customers. A contract. Be it sheer dumb luck or as God listened to his prayers and decided to grant him that opportunity. That was what he got. When my dad bought our family's first home, he got a loan from a small bank called DCB Bank. All is well, until a few years later the 1997 financial crisis hit. As the small banks were bought out by the larger banks, many home loaners received acknowledgement papers on their new home loan payment plan and policies by their new banks. My dad, for whatever reason, never received this. He only knew that his original bank was bought over by the RHB Bank Corporation, and that he is now unofficially their customer. My dad was frugal with his money and God bless him. Financially literate, he knew that if he made a full settlement against his principal loan, he can avoid paying 30 years worth of interest installment. Sometime in 2007, he went to a RHB Bank branch nearby to make a full settlement. And this is how it went down. RHB employer: I'm sorry, sir. Even if you made a full settlement, you would still need to continue making payments for the interest. Dad: what do you mean? I have a home loan contract under DCB that states I can make a full settlement without paying for additional interests. RHB employer: true. But since you've acknowledged and signed under RHB, Dad, I've never received the acknowledgement papers. I never signed any papers from your bank, and all I have here is the DCB Bank contract. RHB employer: sir, under the One Malaysia home loan, Dad, you have to send acknowledgement letters about the loan transfer. Yes, I know. What I want now is for you, RHB Bank, to produce my signature of me acknowledging the new loan policy for RHB. As of now, my paper with DCB is still valid until you produce my signature. Q1 hour of the employer and her colleagues scrambling around their files and databases trying to find any acknowledgement from my dad about their loan contract. At this time, the manager of the bank had called my dad into his office to discuss this problem. It basically had went from civil to a shouting match that can be heard in the neighboring food stalls. My dad couldn't remember most of what was said, but the end of it was what he could still clearly remember. And to his son, it was probably one hell of a badass convo ender. Manager: I'm sorry, Mr. Mohammed, but you still need to make the interest payments, regardless of whether you make a full settlement. Dad: alright, I understand. I'll just have to take this up to Bank Negara, National Bank of Malaysia. Let them help you find that signature of mine. My dad had the bank manager by the balls now. Rather risking a potential $1 million lawsuit and possibly losing his job, he excused himself to make a few phone calls to upper management, which took about half an hour. After said phone calls were done, the manager approached my dad and agreed to the full settlement without the additional interest installments. To add salt to the wound, my dad requested that they have his housing grant ready within the week, to which they delivered. All in all, my dad managed to secure himself a house, the housing grant, and in the process screwed RHB Bank of what is equal to 60,000 United States dollars worth of interest payments, which to a middle-class Malaysian in 2007 is a retirement fund. TLDR, bank's incompetence saved my dad a ton of money in interest payments. Edit, fix typos and such. I have a problem with fat fingering my keypad. And now Mahithar is invisible. Najib is sentenced and Guaneng is fucked. What a roller coaster. Good job by your dad. That's a pro-working class man move. Nice work by your dad. Could you explain why taking this up with Bank Negara would have caused a problem, or why they had influence in this instance? My only guess is they have oversight for all banking, and they would hold the RHB accountable for failing to make the notification, failure to get confirmation, and then attempting to defraud your dad by holding his to terms he did not agree to. If this is the case, it sounds like RHB made a business of doing just that. Props to your father for being financially literate. Any other person would be intimidated. I still don't get how they thought that would apply. But then I remember my stint with a bank in India with whom I had a car loan. They had pre-interest added amount, and if you pay back that amount, which ends up being twice the amount of the car itself and then some. It's a very sneaky clause that gets them interest for the times they aren't even lending you money. On top of that, the foreclosure charges were 25% of the principal charges. I ultimately said duck it. Put that amount in 26 term deposits, remaining of the 60 months, and let them automatically disperse a day before the ME. At least I got some interest reimbursed in that way. You've outsmarted the government. Well done. Greetings from the rich guy across the border. The big banks can be bullies not just to their customers but even to their own employees. Best for us to improve our financial literacy so we don't get screwed by any of them. Fucking nice. My dad did something similar. Although it wasn't revenge. During the GFC, the federal government in Australia introduced a $21,000 first home builder's grant. My dad had already bought a block of land and built a shed on it. And he had bought a kit home and paid cash for everything. He also had the cash to pay a builder to put the kit home together. Suddenly there was the $21,000 grant, and it was for new homes, built by a registered builder, and it had to have a mortgage attached to it. So my dad went and got a mortgage for the lowest amount he could, which was $40,000. Got a builder, got the grant, got the house built, and when the house was finished, walked into the bank and paid $45,000 to finalize the mortgage, principal plus interest. And the $15,000 bought him a new outboard motor and paid for his Land Cruiser U to be rebuilt from the ground up, making it virtually brand new. Love this? In the US, you can get a mortgage through a small bank and they will turn around and sell it to a big bank, so the small bank doesn't have the risk, but the terms of the mortgage are the same. So the only difference for the consumer is who they pay. We had our mortgage sold to a large bank called US Bank. It's still a private bank. Don't let the name fool you. No big deal. I would say the majority of mortgages US Bank has are ones they bought, not ones they issued. Then a year or two later, we had a US Bank employee call us trying to get us to sign up for a checking and savings account with them. No thanks, we said. Why don't you trust us with your money? I see you trusted us enough to get your mortgage through us, he said. No, we didn't, we said. But I see your mortgage. We didn't get it through you, dude. You bought it off of our lender. We had no say in the matter and don't want to use you as our bank. Bye. Honestly, it's so Malaysian. I've heard a few stories where a bank, uni, etc. has fucked up and they will always say yes we fucked up but you still have to pay. Someone I know gave his passport in early to get his work-issued visa renewed early as the last time they delayed. Did it last min. You hand it in 3 months before expiration minimum. He gave it 6 months and 5 or 6 modi in advance so they could start the paperwork and then would just need submit it around the 3-month mark. They didn't, and if your visa expires while they are renewing it, they're fines as it's seen as overstaying. Workplace wanted him to pay the fines even though his actions were meant to avoid that extract thing. I know he was able to get them to pay for it in the end. Wait, so the bank intended to continue collecting interest payments on a loan that would have already been paid in full? What kind of ass-backwards anti-consumer policy is that? Also, why didn't your dad not get a shorter-term mortgage if he intended to pay in full decades before the loan reached maturity? He should have still reported them to the central bank. They were probably doing this to other people. That would be some revenge. Malaysian bank manager here. I recognize some of this storyline. Not saying OP isn't telling the truth, but there are some aspects which I don't get it. RHB employer. I'm sorry, sir. Even if you made a full settlement, you would still need to continue making payments for the interest. I don't quite get this. Why would a bank still require you to make interest payments after the loan is settled? However, around this 1990s era, in order to attract customers, local banks had begun to offer attractive interest rates with a lock-in period attached. Which means if you settle your mortgage loan, say, within 5 years, there would be a one-off payment called early settlement charges, which is based on certain formula. I remember one time I had to call our money market people to explain to me how they derive the figures on a customer. Other than that, continuing paying interest simply doesn't make sense. Bank mergers and acquisitions are not to add salt to the wound. My dad requested that they have his housing grant ready within the week, to which they delivered. By housing grant, I take it you're referring to the title deed of the property. There is no way it gets done within a week without explaining the whole process. There are many parties involved here. The bank, the bank's conveyancing lawyer, your father, the land office, power of attorney, etc. The discharge of charge process within and among the bank departments itself takes more than a working week. I'll just have to take this up to Bank Negara, National Bank of Malaysia. Rather than the National Bank, it is more accurate to call it the Central Bank. Initially, I want to disagree with you that collecting interest on money loaned is a way for banks to legally rob people. It's a business transaction. Of course, they need to make money off of it. Otherwise, why would they loan you money? Further, it costs them money to loan you that money. The money comes from somewhere. I cannot say I know the similarities in Asian banking and that in the US. But in the US, that money comes from depositors essentially. That's money you and I keep in the bank. We are paid a really small amount of interest, if any at all, to keep our money there. The bank can then loan out that money and then some based on the money multiplier. The point is that without the profit incentive the bank has in the form of interest, they would have no motivation to loan someone money to buy or build a house. No one is forcing me to borrow money from them. So if I don't like the terms of the loan, then I don't take the loan. However, what I don't understand is the bank saying your dad would still owe the interest payments even if he settled the loan. That seems very curious to me. Every loan I've ever had in the US, I've made sure to ask to make sure there was no penalty for early payoff. I'm reading now that apparently some mortgages here do have an early payoff penalty. It would not be the remainder of the interest payments, but a smaller amount based on some formula. I would never take a loan like that because I tend to pay off loans early. That all being stated, I said I initially disagreed that the bank taking interest is a way for them to legally rob people. And in the case of a loan that has no early payoff penalty, I still think that. But if they are still able to charge you interest payments on a loan you've settled, then that is no doubt wrong. I'm surprised there isn't a push for reform on that matter. Islamic loans are much better. So basically banks sells you money directly, and that's how they make their money month by month, from interest that gets out of control. By the way, have a fair look at the system without adding your bias towards the religion. On the other hand, Islamic loans are like this. Islamic bank. Oh, so you want to buy this house? Customer. Yes. Islamic bank. Okay. We will buy this house for you, which will cost us 100K, and we will sell you the house for 150K, and you can pay this money over 15 years. Does the contract suit you? So basically there is no increasing interest month by month. What you owe stays the same and you pay it over a period of time. While you pay for it, you can still live in the house. There are different rules depending on the bank, but normally if you couldn't pay, then the contract is null. They take the house and the money that you paid. If the amount you paid is small. If you paid a good amount of money and couldn't pay the rest, then the bank has to settle with you on what you could pay. You might ask, well, wouldn't the bank lose money they invested if they settled for less? And the answer is yes. That's the whole thing. Business should have the ability to fail. Banks shouldn't be the exception that gets away with bad investment. On the other hand, normal banks get to take more money than they invested and still will take everything you own, even after you covered the initial amount they gave you in extra. And they do it purposely so they can take everything you own. They don't care if you are a super good investment as long as they know that they can milk out of you more than they invest into you, even if it causes your whole life to be crippled in debt. Salute to your dad. Like seriously, that plan was so good and it saved him a lot of interest money, and it would have been so satisfying to see the manager's face when he mentioned Bank Nagara. During the housing bubble collapse back in '08, my in-laws had a house foreclosed on. The stupid thing is they had the money, but since the house was a wreck they didn't live there, so the bank was given a new address to send bills to. The new bank refused to send a bill to a different address and thus caused the whole issue. My in-laws never even found out who the new bank was until a week or two before the auction. I understand he never received paperwork, but if that is valid, could others have refused to sign and paid out their debt without penalty as well? Sounds like a gigantic financial loophole. Can you explain how an interest-bearing loan is robbing someone? I hate paying mortgage interest as much as the next person, but nobody forced me to take a loan. I could save my money and pay in cash many years from now, if I so choose. Finally, someone who knows how to spell Q. Also, your dad is a hero for sticking it to the bank. Is it just me, or are the stories from out of Malaysia pretty damn good? Thanks for this, DC. I'm confused about one thing. Why does your dad hate banks charging people interest? I get that charging interest after paying off the loan is patently absurd and seemingly downright criminal. But ignoring that, how else would you expect it to work? You can't expect a bank to loan you enough money to buy a house and then get nothing in return. Banks are businesses too, and there's a really easy way to never have to pay them interest. Never take out a loan.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.